This is the Sportsline Podcast on CHCH, where we love talking sports, especially with local athletes, teams, and executives from Southern Ontario. I'm Bubba O'Neill. Today, we're talking hoops at the highest level. Well, this product from Burlington's Notre Dame High School is in the midst of a slam dunk career. If you hand this broadcaster a microphone, he's a triple-double threat as a host, analyst, or play-by-play announcer. Although Eric Smith is the voice of the Raptors on Sportsnet 590 The Fan, by understanding that you never say no in the media business, many other doors have opened. Let's bring in Eric Smith. How are you, partner?
Well, I'm great, Bubba. I don't know about that picture that you chose there. I mean, the hair is a little wild and whatnot, but I mean, geez, either way, though, I appreciate the shout out. I'm doing well. How you doing?
Yeah, you're looking good, though. Thank you, man. We appreciate you joining us. Hey, I got to say, what's going on? I mean, from the last time you joined us, so much has happened, and I'm going to throw this to you right away. Were you doing a little moonlighting over the summer?
A little bit of moonlighting. And by the way, I got to tell people right now, I'm not moonlighting right now as an Uber driver or a cab driver. The car is parked. That's why you won't see any movement in the back. It's parked. I'm not driving. I'm not using my phone while I'm driving. That's why the seatbelt's not on either. I'm all good. I'm all good. But in the summertime, this past summer, because of the Olympic Games, there was sort of a shift of some bodies of broadcasters that were pulled in different directions to fill in other slots. And then as such, kind of the trickle-down effect of I was pulled away from my world in basketball with the Raptors not being in the postseason to slide over and start doing some Blue Jay games. So I ended up doing just shy of 40 broadcasts this year for the Blue Jays radio network and had a chance to call the Jays action this summer. So that was a first for me in the career and something that I think might continue a little bit next season. I haven't been told otherwise, but we'll see how things play out. But it was really fun to get down to Rogers Center to call some home games and to work some of the road broadcasts as well. Had a lot of fun calling the game that I grew up playing and loving quite a bit in my Burlington stomping grounds.
You know, and let me ask you about that because basketball is such a quick up and down game as you're calling it. I mean, there was a couple of plays in last night's game against Minnesota. I mean, you were just going off. I mean, because the pace is there. Baseball is so incredibly different. How did you adjust?
It was tougher, and I'll tell you, I can't speak to what it was like before, but I can only speak to what it is now, Bubba. It's a lot quicker than you'd think because of the pitch clock. So even though the plays aren't as necessarily intense or as exciting all the time, as action-packed as basketball can be or even as hockey can be, the fact that the game is moving quicker doesn't really allow you the same amount of time to just sit and breathe or tell these long-winded stories perhaps that you might have heard in previous years gone by, generations gone by in baseball broadcasts because of the pace of play. There were times this year, even in the first 5 or 10 games that I called, Bubba, where I would look over at Chris LaRue, my analyst, and go, hold on, was that game ended in 2 hours and 20 minutes? That's quicker than an NBA game. So it really is moving. I think the difference is just the cadence and the projection of your voice. You can't or won't or shouldn't get as high and as excited over a ball or a strike as you would over a big-time three-point shot or a dunk. But then you've got to be ready, obviously, to bring it up and to bring the excitement, especially for a radio broadcast when we're talking about a home run or a dazzling defensive play or a rally that's starting, that's continuing, et cetera. That's when you have to find and pick and choose those moments. And that to me is just, and you know this as well, is that's just kind of broadcasting in general. Like I've done a lot of different sports over the years, bringing to mind tennis, where the first time I ever did tennis, I actually got a warning from the chair umpire because I was broadcasting too loud, and the players complained because I was on one of the side courts that was only 10 rows deep, not in a huge stadium, and I was projecting and broadcasting like I was doing an NBA game or something. So it's just finding that comfort zone and finding your sort of that safe spot and that little sweet spot, and then just kind of taking it from there. And a lot of it is baptism by fire and learning as you go as well. And you feed off the emotion of the crowd, but you feed off the vibe in the game, whatever sport it is as well. And you just kind of, like I say, find that sweet zone.
Let's get back to that sweet spot, and obviously that is the Toronto Raptors. And I never to ask you this question when you were in here the last time, and I think it's just sort of understanding what a broadcaster does and your daily duty. So you had a game against the Raptors, a home game, Raptors and Minnesota Timberwolves. What does your day look like from the time you walk into Scotiabank Arena?
Well, the day starts even at home before that, because you're probably putting in at least, I'd say minimum 2 hours, sometimes up to 3 or more hours of prep time, whether it be reading stories, especially of the opposing team. You're usually pretty good about keeping up on the home team, on the Raptors. But even then, if there's stuff that I haven't read on a day-to-day basis, we're provided actually with an email every day of the clips, which is a breakdown of all the different stories from all the different websites and newspapers and whatnot. So you read that daily, but then trying to do your research on the other team and keeping up with stories and, storylines, any key stats or something that might come up with the other squad as well. It might even involve watching a game or two from that opponent, even if you're watching it, fast forwarding through a lot of things. So the PVR, the DVR is always working with various games and looking at the next opponent. So you're putting in the prep at home, but the actual game night, I normally arrive at least 2.5 hours before tip-off. So for a 7:30 game, I'm there by 5 o'clock, sometimes earlier, sometimes a little later, depending on traffic, but usually 2.5 hours early. And you get there, you talk to some of the players, you talk to some of the coaches, you're talking to your colleagues down on the court. If you've got any TV work to do, like you, and you have to be a pretty boy, you're going to get some makeup sometimes and trying to get in a meal. You're listening to the pregame coaches conference. Both coaches speak. The home coach, so Darko Rajakovic, speaks an hour and 45 minutes before the game. And then the opposing coach speaks 90 minutes before the game. Then again, you're back out on the floor. You're getting your broadcast set up. You're speaking to your producer. So it's a lot of just kind of housekeeping and just making sure that the prep you've done is ready. But then it's also then reacting to something that what the coaches might say or to a story that might pop up. Let's use last night as an example. We assumed, based on things that had been said on Wednesday and even Tuesday, that there was a pretty good likelihood that Scotty Barnes was going to play. But we didn't know it officially until Darko said it last night at 5:45. So now that's new news that, yes, indeed, Scotty Barnes is playing. Then we find out he's playing, but he's playing under a minute restriction, but we don't know how many minutes. So that's kind of anybody's guess. Then on top of that, we find out that black mask that he had been wearing for the last couple of weeks in practice, trying to get used to wearing something to protect that orbital fracture that he's got. Well, he's not going to wear a mask. He's only going to wear goggles. So that's some new news that comes out, and you're prepping for that, and that's obviously good news to deal with Scotty back in the lineup. Then you go listen to Chris Finch, the head coach of the Timberwolves, and he's talking about his lineup, and he's reacting to something that he's asked, that Darko also brought up, when Rajakovic was asked, what do you do with Anthony Edwards and how you defend him now that he's kind of turned into Steph Curry shooting all these threes and becoming such a great three-point shooter? And Darko, without skipping a beat, Bubba, says, I don't think Anthony Edwards is becoming or has become Steph Curry. He's the closest thing I've seen to Michael Jordan. Whoa. And most of us hold on a second, what? Like, Anthony Edwards is a great player, but Darko went further and said, listen, I'm one of the biggest MJ fans you'll find. I've been around the game forever. He is the closest thing I've ever seen to Michael Jordan.
Wow.
And immediately, a lot of people think well, hold on, what about Kobe? And we could come up with other people, but Darko is locked into Anthony Edwards is the closest thing he's seen to Michael Jordan since Michael Jordan left the league. So now we're going to talk to Chris Finch about that as well. And those are then storylines and topics and discussions that you try and bring into your broadcast. And then it plays out even more when the game starts and Anthony Edwards has 5 points and 3 fouls in the first half and picks up his 4th foul 30 seconds into the second half. And you figure he's coming out of the game and he's having a brutal night and off night. And then he goes off and has an incredible third quarter and suddenly brings Minnesota back into the game. So these are all things that you can't plan for, that just sort of come up that then add to your broadcast. I know I just gave you a super long answer, but that's sort of like everything you prep for could be blown up because of something somebody says, or simply because we are fortunate enough and privileged enough to be working in, to me, the true, original, and still to this day best reality TV there is. Absolutely. Live sports. There's no script. It's live sports. Mm-hmm. And you have to just be ready to react. So no matter what you do to prep, you have to be able to react. I don't care if it's TV, radio, or otherwise. You got to be able to react, improv, think on your toes, and just talk about and call what you see.
So on the team basis, in terms of the Raptors, so they do defeat Minnesota 110-105. They improved to 4-12 on the season, good for 13th in the East. I'm sort of celebrating at the end of the game saying, look at that. Look, that's an unexpected effort. We know that Minnesota is a quality team, went to the West Final last year, knocked off, some quality teams along the way. Yet I'm mixed. I'm trying to figure out, should I be happy that the Raptors won, or should I be not happy about it because Masai Ujiri did say this is going to be a rebuilding season. The talks of, what is this, Cooper Flagg, the guy from Duke, the #1 draft pick, is that what we should be aiming for, or should we be aiming for victories? I'm all confused, Eric. Help me out here.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to help you, because I'll probably just either add to your confusion or not be able to sway you good or bad one way or the other. Because I'll tell you this. My standpoint is, and I'm selfish with this, I admit, I would love to rewind and go back to 2019 and have a chance to call, a 50-plus win team and an eventual championship winning team. For me, in my role, there's nothing better than calling a winning team. And I think you're lying if you say that as a fan, as a writer, as a broadcaster, as an executive, as a coach, as a player, whatever, that you don't want to win and that winning isn't more fun. Now, having said all that, the Raptors are at a point where, are they a championship contender this year? By Masai Ujiri's own standards and own words, they aren't. But I think they're better than 4-12. In fact, I think they've played better than what their record indicates. And the old cliched adage is, well, at the end of the day, though, your record is what it is. You are what your record says you are. I just believe, Bubba, there's an old line, I don't know who coined it, but the residue of winning. I think winning and being around a winning atmosphere rubs off. That's the residue. I think then there's the flip side of that, the residue of losing. If you're especially a young team and a young player experiencing a lot of heartache, a lot of tumultuous times, a lot of losing, a lot of appearances in the summertime, not the postseason, you're not getting a taste of that playoff success or even playoff appearances. I think that can weigh on people, on young players, and weigh on organizations. And it spills over into potentially year after year. So it's walking that fine line of, yes, we know that a potential superstar talent could help us improve. But at the same time, is it good for Scotty Barnes to miss the playoffs again? Is it good for Grady Dick to start his career 2 years in, not making the playoffs, and not understanding what it's like to play under those bright lights? Is it good for even an RJ Barrett or an Emmanuel Quickley and many others to be around a 18, 20, 27 win team and going through a lot of losses? Or is it better to win and to maybe get in, but get knocked out, but know what it takes to get there, and then know what it takes to crack through at that next level? Because I've now been there, experienced that. Because what's the other flip side of all this, Bubba, when we talk about playoff teams? Oh, they got to learn how to lose before they know how to win. They've got to take their lumps for a year or two before they figure it out, before they can truly go to that next elite level. Well, we're always coming up with cliches and storylines and angles to, like, well, they're not ready to make the playoffs yet. Okay, they're finally ready to make the playoffs, but they're not ready to win yet. Now that they're ready to win, are they really truly a contender? And can they punch through? It's like, it's always something. So to me, winning cures all. Winning is better than losing. So if at the end of the day, the bonus prize is, after a rough year, you battled hard, you fought hard, but you maybe just weren't good enough, you happen to lose, and you got to pick, fine. But I'm never going to sit here and say you should walk into a season, let alone an individual game, saying, I'm okay if we lose. It's cool. And I guarantee, no matter what you and I say here in this conversation, even if we're both wrong, no matter how we're looking at this, even if we're coming at it from different angles, guaranteed, I'd stake my life on the fact that not one player or one coach is going into last night's game or Sunday's game in Cleveland or any other game saying, it's cool if we lose. You know what? Let's go out and play, but I'm all right if it's a loss. I guarantee they're going out there trying to win. Like, the Raptors are 4-12. That's what, 16 games? I'm horrible at math. 66 left. If they could go 66-0, they would do it. Like, they are trying to win every single game. Darko Rajakovic does not want to wear any more losses, nor does Grady or Scotty or anybody else. But we'll see how the dust settles.
Yeah, I mean, it is so hard to say the word, and I know professionally I hate saying the word tank. I really do. I can't stand saying it because I think it does sort of issue that feeling of, losing breeds losing as winning breeds winning. And, you don't want some of this young talent being infused with it's okay to lose. And you named off some of those names, but the likes of RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Scotty Barnes, Grady Dick, and one of your fellow colleagues at the Fan 590 on a post-game show, I think it was, when I was in the car, said that those four players over the last 65 games have only played 16 minutes together. That's incredible to me.
Well, think about what happened at the beginning of the season, right? Barrett was hurt and didn't start playing right away with the shoulder. Quickly got hurt in the first half of the first game and didn't play the second half, and then went a stretch of games without playing. Came back, got hurt again. Now he's been missing. Then Scotty goes down with this orbital fracture. He's been out. Like, there's 3 guys in your starting lineup that have barely touched the floor together, not just this season, but to the point, I think it was Daniele Franceschi that was doing the post-game show. That's probably the guy you were listening to that's saying that. So it extends back to last year when post-trade and then various guys in and out with injuries and whatnot. But then let's go even further. Like, Bubba, I don't know if you felt the same way, and this kind of goes back to your last question as well when we talk about Cooper Flagg or anybody else, or just the Raptors in general, their record and draft picks and yada, yada, yada. I didn't believe that the Raptors were a top 5 team, but I also didn't think they were a bottom 5 team. I'm talking in the East. Like, when I looked at Brooklyn, Atlanta, Washington, Detroit, Charlotte, there's 5 right there. Raptors would be 6. Well, now who's left of the 9 remaining East teams? There's got to be at least a couple other in there that I'm for. Chicago. There's another team that I thought the Raptors would be at least as good as and maybe better than, but not drastically or significantly worse. Well, I also didn't think that they would be going into the season with potentially up to 60% of, and at the very least, no less than 40% of their starting lineup for the first 16 games. I also didn't think they would be without their arguably either top 2 or 2 of their top 3 second unit guys for the entire season thus far in Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk.
Yes.
So if we talk about Barnes, Quickly, and Barrett interchangeable in terms of having come in and out of the lineup over the first 16, and then no Olynyk and no Brown for the entire season. That's 5 of your top 8 or 5 of your top 9 guys that have been potentially unavailable all season. And yeah, you're 4-12. If you were healthy, I don't think you're 12-4, but would you have 3 or 4 more wins?
Probably.
Could you be a team right now that's 8-8, 7-9, something like that? Could you? Would you be right there in the mix? No, that's not anything to write home about, but you'd be in a potential playoff spot, let alone for sure a play-in spot. So I still wonder what this team actually is and how bad, quote unquote, they are, or how good they potentially are once they get healthy. But the problem is they got to get healthy, and that's an issue.
You know, this league right now is kind of reminding me of the National Football League on any given Sunday, but on any given night, it seems like teams are beating teams, and there's a lot of surprises to me through the first, say, 20 games of the season in the NBA. You got the Orlando Magic at 10-7. You got the Cleveland Cavaliers at 16-1, and the Philadelphia 76ers at 2-12. I will ask you this, Eric Smith. What is the biggest surprise to you, at least in the East?
Philadelphia. I mean, listen, I'd be flat out lying if I said that I thought that Cleveland was going to be 16-1, but I did believe they were a top 3, top 4 team. So, you know, whether they're 16-1 or whether they're, 12-5, they're still one of the best teams in the league. So I don't want to take anything away from what they've done. It's been fantastic to watch, and Donovan Mitchell might be the MVP right now, not getting talked enough about in my belief. But by no means did I see Philadelphia being this bad with the roster that they assembled over the course of the offseason. Now, I know they've dealt with injuries as well, and obviously there's been at the top of the list the injuries and then the drama and the issues with Joel Embiid, and that takes away a ton from them. Now you've got Paul George banged up, but still, when I look at that roster, beyond those guys, I still think that there's depth and talent that is better than a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference, even without Joel Embiid and or Paul George. So I did not see this being a 2-win team. By any stretch of the imagination. I think they are far better. I still believe they can put it together. But the problem is for Philadelphia, for Toronto, for a lot of teams is you dig this deep of a hole. Like, how far do you have to go just to get back to 500, let alone talk about being a team with a winning record? And you're only a quarter of the way into the season, but it's, we're getting close to December already. And if you don't start making some hay at some point and put together a winning streak, you could bury yourself very early in the season. And I don't know what the next step for Philadelphia would be, because I can't imagine, and I'm not saying this and I'm not advocating this, I don't think this should happen, but I can't imagine that they're firing Nick Nurse. Is it really his fault? Are they trading Joel Embiid? Maybe. but you've invested so much in him and you've built around him and you've trusted the process for so long. You're finally going to throw your hands up in the air and say, all right, we're finally done with Joel Embiid. We're moving on from him. I don't know, maybe, but you've also got some aging players because you did put together a team of a lot of names and a lot of talent, but outside of Tyrese Maxey, and yeah, they got a good young player in McCain as well now too, but there's a lot of older dudes on that team. So do you kind of say we'll build around those young studs? There's a lot of questions to be asked. And I don't imagine that they right now are in Philly saying, yeah, you know what, forget it. Let's just tank and go for Cooper Flag. There's too much talent there, and there's too much money having been spent.
No.
I don't know what to make. That's why, to me, they're the most interesting story. Like, even in the West, I didn't think the Lakers were going to be as good as they are, and they've impressed. Mm-hmm. So, let's see how the dust settles, though, when we get to the halfway point, not the quarter point.
There's a lot of questions going on in the NBA, and I heard Bomani Jones talk the other day, and it really made me consider some things about the NBA. And I feel like there's a lot of, I'm hearing on ESPN as well, too, what's wrong with the NBA? There's some questions about the in-season tournament. There's always the talk about officiating. Load management has been a talk for now about 4 or 5 years. The game itself, people are talking about it being too much of a three-point game from the outside in. Is the game in a good place right now?
I mean, I love the game, and I still will watch the NBA every night, whether I'm working a broadcast or not. Even if I'm not prepping for the next team, I'm still watching the NBA. I love it. However, you just hit on a bunch of the points that I think need to be cleared up or cleaned up as time goes on. I think that as incredible the three-point shot is, I'll give you another example. Going back to last night, it was one of our colleagues, Michael Grange from Sportsnet, who asked Chris Finch about how his team is taking more threes this year. And again, this started with Anthony Edwards becoming more of a three-point shooter, et cetera, as well. And the team overall starting to take more three-point shots. And he said, this is, again, Michael, I'm paraphrasing his question, but he said, what is considered like good in the NBA now in terms of three-point attempts? Like, what gets you into the conversation now as a team that is known for taking threes, but then also making threes? And the Celtics, I believe, I didn't look at the numbers today, Bubba, but I think they're averaging almost or just above 50 three-point attempts per game. And Finch last night said, if you want to be considered a good three-point shooting team and a team that's known for three-point shooting, you're not even in the conversation unless you're taking at least 40 a game. 40 three-point shots a game only gets you into the conversation. You got the Celtics out there potentially taking 50 attempts a game. Now, the problem is you're taking 50. How many are you making? That's an issue. Listen, no team's going to go out and regularly shoot 45, let alone 50+% from three. But if you're taking 40, 50 plus three balls a game and you're only shooting 32, 34%, that's not good. That's not good basketball. That's not entertaining basketball to watch, guys jacking up shots from the perimeter that are missing constantly and then long rebounds and whatever else. It's not good. But I also think a major issue is the way the game is being officiated or not. Hopefully our friends, the Foxcrofts, aren't listening, because I think the officiating is not great right now. I think that, we can say that about all sports, and it's become tougher because of the skill level and because of the scrutiny through media and through all the different camera angles that are available, et cetera, et cetera. I get that. But how many times, Bubba, do we see in basketball, again, game I love, when I grew up, I was taught that when your hand's at, like if the ball is a clock, if your hand's at 6 o'clock and you're doing this, that's a carry or that's a travel. You see it every single possession, every single night.
Yep.
That's not good. How about last night in the game when McDaniels comes down and absolutely dunks on Scotty Barnes' head, and then Barnes comes back the other way. And by the way, he hams it up to the Raptor bench. He talks some junk to Scotty. Then he poses for his bench. The Minnesota bench is jaw-jacking at Scotty Barnes. And seconds later, Scotty pulls up, buries a deep three right in McDaniels' face, and kind of pumps his arm and does the whole bow and arrow thing, and then points at the Minnesota bench and then starts yelling at McDaniels. I don't think he said any magic words. Maybe he did, but Scotty got teed up.
Ugh.
That's not good for the league either when you're legislating emotion out of the game. Like, fans want to see that. They want to see this showmanship and some of the trash talking. And if we're not fighting, if we're just doing hand gestures and posing and look at me, and it's kind of bravado. I think a lot of fans want to see that. And if we're going to blow the whistle and call technical fouls and send guys to the line and the game slows down, I had a friend call me the other day too and tell me, I'm watching an NBA game. And listen, you've heard this 1,000 times, as of most fans. But he said, I watched the game the other night. There was, I think he said, like 2 minutes and 40 seconds left in the game. It took 27 minutes because there were like 5-6 timeouts and stoppages and reviews and whatever else. Like, that's got to change. So there's a lot of things that the league could clean up to fix things, make it more entertaining. Heck, going the FIBA route and adopting the FIBA rule of the ball being live on the rim. I think that would bring more excitement to the game as well, and get rid of some of the goaltending plays and make it more exciting around the rim with guys battling for the ball because it's live and it's up there. I think that would be a way. So there's certainly ways that the league could fix and clean things up and try to bring a little more entertainment back to the game.
You know, it's a completely sort of, comparison's real tough, but I'll tell you, I've watched a lot of the CEBL and what Mike Morreale has done with that league, and the way the games end. I forget the name of the ending with the last 3 minutes. Like I think actually it's more fun to watch in a lot of ways. Of course, there's not the name recognition. It's completely different. We know that. We're not silly here. But boy, they've got a good product there in terms of watching good basketball. That's just my opinion.
They really do. And sorry, say it again.
No, I'm saying it's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think your opinion's absolutely valid, and I know it's my well, it's not technically my job, but it's still my job as a basketball guy. I'm totally vapor locking on the name of it as well. The way that they do the scoring at the end, I'm embarrassed that I don't know.
The Elam ending.
Elam, yeah. It's funny, in my head, I was thinking the Framingham. I think that's the cholesterol score thing or something. So maybe the Elam ending. I think it's super exciting, no doubt. I don't know that the NBA would ever bring that in. But maybe it's something to consider. Maybe it's something that they actually then test out in the G League, because they look at the CEBL model and maybe they start it in the G League. Because, listen, I think there's probably a lot of purists in Major League Baseball that don't like the fact that there's a runner on second to start the extra innings now. That seems like a farce, and that seems like not the way the game should be played or was played and not intended to be played, blah, 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 blah. But Major League Baseball, to me, one of the most, old school, archaic sports around, was at least trying to think way outside the box and come up with something new age and funky. And they've done it. People have kind of adapted to it. So would NBA fans adapt to that? Yeah, maybe they would. I don't know that it's necessarily needed, though. I like the fact that at least in the NBA, there's still always a winner, which we don't necessarily get in hockey. Yeah. Like hockey's tried 10 different things, and I think they've all been terrible. Why? Like, listen, how many times are we going to actually have 3 or 4 or 5, period overtime and have a regular season game go into 7 periods? It's going to happen from time to time, but could we not come up with a way to just have a winner, period, just like they do in the NBA? Anyways, I don't want to go on a total tangent there. I just think that the CEBL has set up a good blueprint. And I think the other thing the CEBL has done, certainly for Canada, is providing now something that's been long overdue, an opportunity to see professional basketball, quality professional basketball played on Canadian soil, and providing an outlet and an opportunity for yes, international players, and yes, other North American / American players, but for Canadians. And I think it's been overdue. And I think the success of that league, from a basketball standpoint, but even from a business standpoint in the attendance, I think is speaking volumes about what I'm saying about how long overdue it is. And kudos to the fans coming out, but to all of the people that are running that league with Mike at the top and everybody underneath. I think it's fantastic. And I'll use this opportunity as well. These are my words, not yours. I mean, I'm not the Hamilton guy you are, but it's all connected. We're all close. Hamilton better get a franchise back.
Yes.
And I firmly believe they need to play in a smaller venue, but Hamilton better get a franchise back, because when everything is said and done with the renos at the arena downtown and everything else, listen, I like that Brampton has supported the team, but Hamilton needs to have a team back.
I'm with you on that. Here, you won't get any argument from me. We got about 2 minutes left in this Zoom connection here. So I just got to get this across to everyone. We share a love. And I go back, obviously I'm older, I go back to 1980, and I know you're probably about 1990s. But both of us were at Highmark Stadium on Sunday and watching Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, those frauds, go down. Boy, there's something special happening this year with the B-Lo.
Hey, keep your mouth shut, man. I don't want to jinx it. I'll tell you what, though. Let me draw a quick comparison to what you were talking about and when I used that line with the Raptors and the residue of winning. The Bills weren't – this isn't the greatest example because the Bills were still in better shape perhaps than the Raptors were in terms of the projections and the expectations. But when you lose significant players in both the offensive and defensive side of the ball – and going into the same season where you've lost notable key players, you're also dealing with 25% of your cap is in dead salary, dead cap. The expectations for the Bills were, if you're a 500 team this year and maybe you slide into a playoff spot, a wild card, hey, that's pretty good. And you know what? Bring it back next year and hopefully you're better. Nobody had this team being 9-2 going into week 12. Nobody. So they're playing with house money, and I think part of that is not only because of Josh Allen playing at an MVP level, but it's also the residue of winning games that maybe you didn't think you would, that positive energy and vibe spilling over, guys that had a lower role that are now maybe, they're sitting up a little higher in their seat, and they're puffing that chest out a little bit more, and they're playing with a little bit more confidence, the residue of winning that carries over. And I think that is why you and I both feel, even though I don't want to talk about it, that something special could be building because they're doing it in a year we didn't think they would, as opposed to maybe not doing it and living up to it in the year or years we thought they should.
The residue of winning has been this podcast, my friend Eric Smith. Thank you so much. I know you're getting out on the road very, very soon with the Raps on I think it's a 4-game road trip, but fantastic stuff. Enjoy the season. We love hearing you on the radio, doing your hosting as well, too. And it really was a treat listening to you do the baseball, too, because I know as a broadcaster, I go, this is a real challenge for him, something, later in his career that he's doing, and you were marvelous. So congratulations on that.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Bubba. Thanks for the support.
All right, bud. Take care. Folks, that's your Sportsline Podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking to extra special sports figures from our hood. If you do know of a special athlete, team, or event that deserves recognition, the Sportsline Podcast do want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button, and be sure to check out Trending Now, and Louis Butko's, of course, his podcast as well, too, Newsmakers, for the outstanding talent that make the Sportsline Podcast possible. Thank you so very much, and we'll see you next week.